The regular broadcast of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission for March 29th, 2022 will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this live broadcast of our virtual meeting of the March 29th, 2022 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota statutes section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Barbara Howard and I currently serve as Vice Chair of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Present.
Commissioner Booty.
Present.
Commissioner Howard.
Present.
Commissioner Johnson.
Present.
Commissioner Maston. Commissioner Nystrom.
Present.
Commissioner Sandbolt. Commissioner Struthers. And I'll check on those one more time. Commissioner Maston. Commissioner Sandbolt. Commissioner Struthers.
Present.
And Commissioner Van Der Eyck will be absent, so that's 6 members present.
Let the record reflect we do have quorum. Thank you. With that, we'll proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for this meeting. We will work from the agendas that are available online. I will go through the agenda and sort out which items will be withdrawn, which items will be continued to a future meeting, which items will be discussed, which items will be put on the consent agenda to be approved as recommended by staff and without further discussion. Item number 4 is 1215 Marshall Street Northeast, Ward 3. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness and a historic variance. Item number 4 will be on the consent agenda unless someone wishes to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendations. Item number 5 is 212 3rd Avenue North, Colonial Warehouse. Item number 5 will be discussed. So that is the proposed agenda. The consent agenda will include the following items. Item number 4, 1215 Marshall Street Northeast, Ward 3. Is there any opposition from commissioners to the staff recommendation for this item? Seeing none, is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak in opposition to this item? Press *6 on your phone so that it will unmute and we can hear you. Hearing no opposition to placing this item on consent, we will approve item number 4 as a consent item in one motion at the start of the meeting. Item number 5, 212 3rd Avenue North, Colonial Warehouse, will have a staff presentation and commission discussion. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda? And I want to note Commissioner Sandbolt has arrived.
Commissioner Johnson moves to approve or adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Is there a second?
Nystrom second.
Thank you, Commissioner Nystrom. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call a roll on the motion.
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Booty.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Maston. Commissioner Nystrom.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandbolt,
Aye.
Commissioner Struthers,
Aye.
Chair Howard.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas and 0 nays.
The agenda is approved. Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our March 15th, 2022 meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Sandbolt, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Is there a second?
Booty seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Booty. With that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Bjornberg,
Abstain.
Commissioner Booty,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Abstain.
Commissioner Maston, Commissioner Nystrom,
Abstain.
Commissioner Sandbolt,
Aye.
Commissioner Struthers,
Aye.
Chair Howard.
Aye.
That's 4 yeas and 3 abstentions.
The minutes are approved. Before I open the hearing to public comments, let me summarize the process for conducting a public hearing in this virtual format. The process for public hearing is as follows. First, we will act on the consent agenda we just set. Once the item on the consent agenda is approved, the commission is done with that item and applicants may contact the planning staff about next steps. After the consent agenda item is approved, we will take the remaining agenda item in order. There's only one order. Planning staff will present its report and commissioners may ask questions to staff. Then if the applicant wishes to speak, they'll be able to speak and commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. In order to activate your microphones, the applicant will need to press *6 on your phone and wait to hear the recorded message so we can hear you. So I will now open the public hearing on the consent agenda items. I understand Commissioner Struthers has a statement to make regarding the item.
Thank you, Chair Howard. I have a conflict I would like to declare on item number 4.
Thank you, Commissioner Struthers. Do any commissioners oppose the staff recommendation for item number 4? Seeing none, are there any callers who oppose the staff recommendation for this item? Press *6 to speak and wait for the recording so that we can hear you. Hearing none, I will now close the public hearing on the consent agenda items. May I have a motion to approve staff findings and recommendations for this item?
Johnson so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Is there a second?
Booty seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Booty. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Bjornberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Booty,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Maston, Commissioner Nystrom,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandbolt,
Aye.
Commissioner Struthers,
Abstain.
Chair Howard.
Aye.
That's 6 yeas and 1 abstention.
Item number 4, 1215 Marshall Street Northeast, Ward 3 is approved as recommended by staff on the agenda. The applicant may contact planning staff tomorrow about next steps. Our only item is for discussion. There is no public hearing or action to be taken. So item number 5, 212 3rd Avenue North, Colonial Warehouse. The staff report is being presented by Rob Skalecki.
Thank you, Chair Howard, and good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Rob Skalecki, Senior Planner in the Historic Preservation section of CPED. Today I'm presenting a discussion item for design review for exterior alterations to the property located at 212 3rd Avenue North, commonly known as the Colonial Warehouse building. Through the submitted materials we are commenting on tonight, staff have identified that a certificate of appropriateness application would be the required application for the proposed project. The property, of course, is a contributing resource in the Warehouse Historic District. Next slide, please. The subject property was originally constructed in 1885 as the Minneapolis Street Railway Company building. An additional 2 stories were added to the building during the period of significance for the Warehouse Historic District. And the building has changed multiple times throughout the Warehouse Historic District's period of significance, which is rather evident through this photo here from the 1890s. Construction in 1909 left the building most recognizable to its current appearance. The building is characterized by its cream brick cladding and repeating 2-story Romanesque arches with recessed storefronts, which include detailed cornices dividing the first and second stories of those arches, and of course multi-light windows. These have been significant features since the original iteration of the building was completed as designed by architects Dunnell and Elliott. Next slide, please. The subject property retains good historic integrity, although windows have been replaced and select areas of masonry features have been reconstructed over time. The size of the building and corner lot placement that you can see here in some of the project representative submitted materials, with the unusual right-of-way grades at both primary elevations. So that's the 3rd Avenue North elevation, which is the one with the arches on the east side of the building. And the other primary elevation you can see is the 2nd Street North elevation, which is the side, and that is the north or the northeast elevation. So both these elevations have unusual grades at the public right-of-way. And I will note too that you'll notice the east side of the property does retain a noteworthy section of the property's historic loading dock. The project representatives, the applicants, are proposing multiple exterior alterations to the building, which include the following. First, an installation of an arched metal entry embellishment and a small canopy with a canopy sign at the main entry. And I'll show this in later slides as well, just a bit more detail with the applicant's submitted materials, as well as removal of existing non-historic metal wall covering and sign. One sign at this location is also proposed. A metal grate design will be proposed to be installed over the historic masonry infill at this location. And the existing metal wall covering that is proposed to be removed with the sign was approved and installed at the property in 2017. The applicants are also proposing to install horizontal metal tracks that are proposed into historic masonry extending along part of the side, which is the north or the northeast elevation, and the rear, which is the west or the northwest elevation. And this will potentially include track lighting. And these are proposed from staff's understanding in part to hide existing electrical conduits, at least at the side elevation where this is proposed. There will also be repair of the historic front elevation loading dock that I mentioned, and replacement of the non-historic handrails are proposed by the applicant to be replaced with those of vertical balusters with horizontal wire, and they would include removable planters at these locations as well. Next slide, please. The applicants are also proposing the installation of contemporary lighting at various locations at the primary elevations, Non-historic lights already do exist in some of these locations, and the proposed designs replacing these primary elevation lightings that currently exist there would be smaller and less noticeable. The existing lights, and I'll show pictures later of these, are funnel-like lights at the second story that provide uplighting, and then gooseneck standard industrial type contemporary lights at the first story level. And then lastly, the applicants are proposing the construction of a rear, which is the west or northwest elevation canopy, and alteration of the entry ramp features there, as well as painting of the tenant doors on the side, which again is the north or northeast elevation. And the applicants have suggested that these proposed changes are desired to make the building more appealing to potential commercial tenants and customers. The project team has not yet shown that some of the proposed alterations would be necessary to receive the desired outcome of increased visitors and commercial activity that they expressed. The applicant team has responded to early staff feedback. They've been able to work with staff. They've changed parts of the project scope to deliver what you're seeing here in front of you today. And staff has encouraged the applicants throughout all this to propose fewer changes to the building's primary elevations. Next slide, please. Staff is requesting feedback on the project design based on the Minneapolis Warehouse Historic District Design Guidelines, and of course the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. Specifically, we are requesting feedback on 3 questions, which you will have noted in the memo that you have in front of you, or had in front of you to review. What I'll do now is just go over those 3 questions and kind of clarify staff's concern, and then I'll leave that up to you, Chair Howard, and other commissioners, how you want to respond to that in the discussion period. So the first question that staff had was, do commissioners have concerns regarding the proposed changes to the public right-of-way? The current non-historic balustrade at the historic loading dock is contemporary and compatible. Staff has expressed concern about altering this further to a horizontal wire design. That's a type of design that's a contemporary trend that staff frequently considers to be incompatible at primary elevations, and we routinely condition for removal of this type of proposal in applications that come in front of us. The design, usually when we would condition for removal of that proposal, a wire type design railing, we would recommend for something that's similar to what's existing there currently. The applicants are proposing to retain and repair the historic loading dock, which you can see here is shown in the 1912 photo from the Minnesota Historical Society. It existed at that time, potentially earlier, but it is a historic feature. Of course, in this instance, there were no railings there. The other thing I want to note about this photo while I'm talking about this is you will notice that there is the infill in the entry opening. So it is the fourth archway in the building. From this perspective, you'll notice that there is infill there. So the infill that we're discussing as part of this proposal is considered to be historic, or at least was a historic feature of the property. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on both a mixed street, which is 3rd Avenue North, and a commercial street, which is 2nd Street North, as identified in the guidelines, which does allow for some flexibility for adding additional planters and pedestrian features that the applicants desire. Staff will note that large planters are already present at the property at the 3rd Avenue North elevation. So the second question we had is, do commissioners have concerns about adding select features which may affect the historic character and materials of the building? So staff concerns are mainly focused on the addition of the metal embellishment details over the building's characteristic masonry features and entry arch. Canopies can often be considered compatible in on Warehouse Historic District properties where their installation does not affect character-defining features and or where historic precedent has been confirmed through evidence. So staff had concern about, again, as you can see in this photo here from 1929, the proposed entry, or the entry area there with the proposed changes would be covering up certain aspects of that masonry arch and changing what's currently existing over that infill area of that entry. Next slide, please. And lastly, staff are wondering if commissioners have any initial comments about changing signs from what has already been granted for approval at the property through the master sign plan. The applicants are proposing additional signs or changes to the signs, which will be evaluated as a revision to the property's current master sign plan, which was included in the attachments for this memo. Sign plans weren't finalized in time to be included in this review for specific details on signs. The existing master sign plan, staff will note, does already allow for a notable collection of signs at the property. Although, as you've seen through the historic photos that have been shown, there's been a long history of many signs at the property, many tenants. In some instances, these signs existed in dimensions and locations that are currently not permitted by the design guidelines for on-premise signs and awnings. As seen, of course, through the historic photos that I mentioned. So with that, I will leave that up to you, how you'd want to address those questions, how you'd want to discuss this. If you have any other questions for staff, I do understand that the applicants and the property owner are here as well for questions, and they may want to speak as well. Other than that, we do have the additional slides submitted by the applicant as slides following these in my presentation if we need to reference them. But thank you.
Thank you for the report. Before we take any questions for staff or hear from the applicant, I understand Commissioner Maston has joined our meeting by phone. Commissioner Maston, can you press *6 to voice your presence?
Chair Howard, if I may be so bold, I'd also like to remind Commissioner Maston that she may be muted on her personal phone device. Although I see you're unmuted, so I'll sign off so you can speak.
Hi, this is Commissioner Maston. I am on the line.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. I'm glad we were able to get you in on the call. Commissioners, are there any questions for staff before we ask the applicant to speak? I'm not seeing any come in, but hold on, there might be some later. I understand the applicant is available and might like to speak. Could you please press *6 on your phone and wait to hear a recorded message to activate your microphone so we can hear you? Be sure to state your name and address.
Welch Lyles, Asama Partners, 3240 Chaucer Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wonderful. Did you have anything that you would like to present to the commissioners tonight? Or are you just here for questions?
So I'm with Asama Partners, with the property owner, and I think I'm joined this evening by our design team with Nelson. I don't know, Kevin and Stefan, are you guys available as well?
Yes, so Stefan Vogelman here, Boston, Massachusetts, with Nelson.
Did you have a presentation you wanted to give us, or are you just here for questions?
So I think we wanted to take some time to introduce Asana Partners and let you know who we are as the property owner, since we are new to the North Loop in the Minneapolis area. And then I think Stefan was going to take some time to just briefly discuss some of the architectural features and the changes that we've elected to make, and why we feel like they are in the spirit of the original architecture and meet those standards of the Secretary of Interiors. If that's all right, and then we'd be glad to open up for questions after that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I understand that there's some slides that we could show.
I would have to have Rob bring those up, perhaps. We don't have access to video.
Okay.
Yeah,
we do have.
Unfortunately, we were only given phone dial-in access this evening.
There is a slide up now. It's a rendering from the 11th of March showing the arched openings.
I assume it's of the front of the building. Let's call it the North 3rd Avenue. And what we're trying to do here is the overall of this project is to create historic appreciation, right? To return the legacy of this building and the public's awareness of the original aspects of this building, built as the powerhouse for the Minneapolis Street Railway. So the rails become a theme that we're using in a very, very subtle way and in a very light-handed way to establish that. The other thing we're trying to do is obviously improve the tenant experience in this project. And as well as mentioned, we're spending, there's a lot of capital improvements, investment being made on the interior of this 200,000 square foot building. And the market is telling us that the outside also needs upgrade, whether it's for the tenant experience and their pride of entering and exiting this building every day, or whether it's even just the retailers, as you can see from some of the wear and tear that's happened on that, on the loading dock, which by the way is City of Minneapolis property. And we have contacted the Europe Public Works Commission about some of the interventions that we would need or we would like to propose on that dock. And then lastly was the third goal would be to increase this neighborhood vitality, make better connections with this public realm, clean up the building, simplify it, and especially on the North 2nd Street, the retail there is, we feel, compromised, and the street is kind of, especially on this side of the street, lacks vitality. I know there's a lot of public investment, private investment in some of the projects across the street from this. And I think that, we feel that increasing the signage, collecting these retailers together in a symbolic way, for example, using the lightweight rails again on that side street, will give them the visibility they need, we are here approach, that these three retailers are then grouped together, and you can then begin to see that they exist in this sort of well that's between the bridge abutment and our building. So, and we figure that railing system decreases the lighting, safety. It's, there would be concealed LED within it. We will conceal the conduit. It provides those two rails, again, very small, provide an armature to fasten signage to, and also to fasten the lighting that we propose to the new, more contemporary lighting we put on there. If I could just run back to the front entrance again, that the rails around the arch, what we're trying to do is establish a hierarchy. From the distance, it's sort of difficult to find out where the entrance is. And we're trying to create an entrance that scales appropriately to the use of this building. So that would be one thing. And in the process, we're cleaning up the building. We're removing those medieval banners. We're removing the LED rainbow lighting that goes around the arch. And we're, we're just essentially Again, just trying to create something that I guess evocative of the original history of this building. So using this sort of rail motif again would help. We also are exposing the brick. We're going to be removing down, as the reviewer mentioned, we're going to be removing a lot of the dark metal panels that are up there right now, and we're going to replace it with a what I like to call a trellage system of very small aluminum stock, square rectangular stock, that's going to mimic the divided light that you see on within the existing arched windows. But it's still transparent enough to see the existing brick that will be revealed behind it. So in a nutshell, that's the front and the side. At the rear, I think it's just basically weather protection. When I say the rear, the lower level parking lot behind the bridge, the north side of the building, really just to create, to encourage the tenants to use this entrance, and maybe perhaps in the future, create an entrance that's worthy enough of being connected to the bike rail trail back there.
It's my understanding that if you have actual slide numbers, the staff can forward to specific slides if you wanted to talk about anything specific.
Oh, okay.
I would ask the, sorry, this is Rob Skalecki here. I just want to ask the clerks if they could move the slides forward a bit to the title page that would show. And then that'll be a few more, I think one more after this. There you go. Thanks.
Sorry, are you at the title page?
We have a title page right now. And it looks like the next slide is the location.
Okay, perfect. And you can see our site, and uniquely, it as appropriately as designed, it was at the center of the electrical service for half of the city. And that we'll get to in a second. That's just a very minor detail of how we collect the rails and pull them together into one spot to avoid the property line issue. The next slide is sort of the history slide. I believe it's number 3. That's already been reviewed. And we can skip ahead of a few more. I would actually skip to, let's say slide 8. And you'll see an existing view of the building with our proposed. And what we're trying to do here is just sort of show that the embellishments that we're putting on this building we're trying to make an apples-to-apples comparison. That in the scale of things, they are pretty minor, we believe. We're trying to keep them very light.
Well, and Stefan, just to add to that, I would say a lot of the changes that are being made are to features of the building that, I think staff even mentioned earlier are not historical or original, and have been altered already over time. And really other aspects are pieces that are being added to the building that, should they be removed in the spirit of the Secretary of Interior Standards, could be removed and the building could be restored to its original conditions. And really in that regard, don't retract from that historical aspect of those pieces. And so, we feel they're very in keeping with kind of the nature of the building and the history there. And at the same time, still allow that new activation that we talked about, that is so important to retailers on that street to be able to kind of stand out from the office tower above, and to that same point for the office entrance to be able to stand out and as a designation, whereas right now the whole building itself kind of blends in, and it's hard to really differentiate one piece from the other.
Right. Slide 11 will address some of that, especially with the amount of stuff that's been applied over the building to try to solve this problem. And I think that we are proposing to remove a lot of it, but we are also proposing to return, sort of a lightweight intervention is placed. I would then just go to slide 15, perhaps. It's a view of the entrance. And we understand that from reviewers' comments that the rails up front in a wire system with steel might not be the appropriate thing. And we were just reacting to what was at the hotel down next door and trying to be contextual. But yeah, we certainly would have could investigate how those rails look. One thought is even if that
and also feel that a lighter rail system actually kind of opens up the view to the building as well, which is really the goal there, to try and accentuate the building itself and not the rail.
That's right. Yeah, and those planters are actually let the rail pass through it. It's really just a small planter on top that sits above the 42-inch rail. But they're movable. They're not fixed. They're just on some leveling legs, and those would be made out of like an oil rub steel, dark steel of some sort. And those help define the rhythm, the piers. They pull it out to the face of the building, but yet they're not permanent. Then, as from this view, you can also see the signage that we are proposing. You can see the trellage that we place within the arch. It's trying to mimic, the left and right of every arch. That's still to be worked out a little bit, but the main purpose of this entrance, or the main goal we are trying to get some recommendations on, or some feedback on, is that acknowledgement of the arch in this lightweight rail. So if you go to the next slide, we think it's sort of ever changing. As you see it from the oblique, or as you see it frontally, it almost disappears at a certain point, and light still passes through it. And its lightweight construction will also minimize the amount of connection that we have to make back to the building structurally. That's essentially it for the front of the building. If you could go to slide 21, I'd like to show that image there. What we're looking at is the newer retail that's just opened up across the street, the Lululemon, the Madewell. There's this sort of retail gap created by the street. Obviously, it's a very large street in the 2nd Avenue. You have to jump that street to get to the retail that's provided within the ground floor of our building. What we're trying to say here, or trying to accomplish here, is by using that lightweight armature, again made of the same rails that are being used to wrap the front of the entrance, we're trying to allow it to sort of unify all those 3 retailers with a horizontal line that lines up with the existing 2nd floor, and creates that armature. And it may have a little bit of color, not a color, but it may have a little bit of LED lighting coming through, hopefully some warm tones, and then color on the doors, and signage placards that are hung, that are higher up than they currently are now. Again, what we're trying to say is that you would see the Madewell, the Lululemon, you would see these businesses on the 2nd Avenue, North 2nd Avenue. Then you would see the businesses on 3rd Street on the south side of our building. The next slide, slide 22. Those are the rails that we would be applying to the building that would conceal the conduit, conceal the lighting, create the armature for passing lighting and passing signage. And we began to hint that perhaps some brighter colors on the doors of those 3 retailers could give a little more vibrancy than what you see in the existing photos. And then the next slide, 23, it's just again showing you the burden that we have of having trying to accomplish this to make this sort of successful retail, which within this sort of The next slide, 24, begins to, which I think you've all had a chance to look at, begins to just talk about the detailing of this piece. And then lastly, page 25, you could see in the existing conditions, this is what I'll call the north entrance at the lowest level of the building. We want to make this just a much more appealing tenant entrance and increase its safety and also weather protection. So you can see in the existing photo that the place does need a little bit of cleanup, and this intervention could create a nice inviting entrance, but it's still using the existing rails and stairs that would just be improved or upgraded. So that would be, those are my presentation comments that I wanted to make clear to everybody.
Thank you for those wonderful explanations. Before we actually get into discussion, I just wanted to check with commissioners. Do you have any specific questions for the applicant? Again, I'm not seeing any coming in. So let's discuss, commissioners. Let's try to look at those 3 questions specifically that staff have requested feedback on. Rob has specifically asked for information on the proposed changes to the public right-of-way, the addition of the metal embellishments, and changes to the signs that have been approved through the master sign plan. Does anyone want to kick off the discussion and try to get some feedback to the applicant? Everyone's very talkative again tonight. Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt.
Thank you, Chair Howard. So I guess I'll try to voice some feedback on these items. I am appreciative that the applicant is thinking about the implications of some of these additions, especially from the perspective of how they will be anchored to the building and how attachments will be made. I appreciate hearing about kind of the trellis work over the opening, that it was thoughtfully designed in a way that would minimize long-term impact on the openings. I do think that some of the previous interventions that were made to draw attention to the entry were not appropriate. And so I do appreciate an attempt to do something that might accomplish the goal within the confines of being reversible. I would say about the trellis, I am having a little heartache. I think, part of the character of the warehouse district and the warehouse building is that buildings is that there is this kind of repetitive nature and that entries don't call attention to themselves. I think that is part of the character of some of these warehouse buildings, despite the fact that that's not kind of in vogue in current design concepts. We tend to be a little bit more direct about wayfinding and helping people find entries in today's designs than I think was kind of part of the design vocabulary for the warehouse district. So I guess from a perspective of that trellis, I do appreciate that it's trying to have a minimal impact on the building, but I am a little concerned about the visual kind of implications that has for this district. So a little concern there. I would say as far as the railings, the discussion about the cable railings, I personally feel that those aren't much more of a different kind of modern interpretation than even some of the railings that are there existing. So personally, the cable railings, I don't have an objection against those. I think they differentiate themselves from anything that would have been historic in a way that's intentional and still has kind of an industrial character that to me seems compatible with the character of the district, but I do worry about the fact that evidently from a perspective of some previous applications, we've discouraged the use of that type of railing. So I wouldn't want to change or kind of change how we've been treating those previously. But I think a new railing would be compatible with what needs to happen on the site. As far as the kind of the side and the signage, I do appreciate the intent to kind of make the second street side of the building more visually kind of drawing people into those retail spaces. So I appreciate the idea of trying to carefully incorporate some signage in a way that's intentional. I also feel that the rails proposed, do provide some sort of concealment for the intervention that needs to be made. I would say that those to me are not visually obtrusive enough to detract from the character of the warehouse district. So I would be in support of those interventions. And then I guess the final one is the canopy at the rear entry. And I can appreciate wanting to provide a canopy entry for residence area. But I do think that in that particular location, there's shown to be kind of a bar or a beam going off to the right of that canopy. And for me, that bar or that beam might be kind of a little overzealous and might kind of imply that there might have been a rail there originally, something like a beam that would have carried. We see a lot of sliding doors, loading dock doors in this district, and so I wouldn't want to be implying something of that nature that may have been there historically that clearly was not. So those are kind of some initial thoughts from my perspective. Interested to hear what other commissioners have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. No one else is jumping up to speak yet. I concur with much of what you've said. I feel a little differently about the horizontal wire. I do prefer the contemporary balustrade that we've used elsewhere and feel that it meets our design guidelines a little bit better than the horizontal wire. And I do have a concern about that trellis system. I feel like it takes away from the openings that are there. It doesn't seem to align with the original pane configuration of the windows in those areas, and it seems to detract from those arched openings. And those of you who have heard me speak about master sign plans in the past, I'm usually not too concerned about signage because I know that all of these districts had much more signage at various points in their lives. So I have less heartache about that. Any other commissioners have some feedback you'd like to provide to the applicant and to Rob? No one's piping up. Commissioner Nystrom.
Hi, so I just wanted to voice that I also concur about the trellis. I was having a very hard time with that. I think both Commissioner Sandbolt and Vice Chair Howard put it very clearly, kind of how it just kind of detracts from it. So I'm not a fan of that either. I also am fine with the signage. I agree with how they've kind of concealed some of that conduit on the side. So I tend to agree with Commissioner Sandbolt on that, on the third street side. And then also agree that I wouldn't want to say that the horizontal cable railing, I wouldn't want to approve that like Commissioner Samuel said. So, I mean, she voiced basically everything I was thinking, but I just wanted to also add my 2 cents saying, yes, I concur. So, because I didn't want to leave you guys as the only 2 people to speak, but she basically said everything I was thinking. So I figured I'd really say that.
I appreciate that, Commissioner.
Yes.
And if any other commissioners want to just say something similar, or if you have additional comments. Otherwise, Rob, do you feel like you have enough feedback?
Chair Howard?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Maston?
Yes, I really agree with what you've been saying. I did have a question about the trellis, though. I wonder if it would be something to consider looking at it without the grid pattern over the brick, but just maybe the arch pattern, or even more of a simple version of that arch pattern without so many rails, if that makes sense.
I think I understand what you're saying. I too am not as concerned about the arch aspect. It's the trellis, the grid against the windows and against the brick. Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. I think I'm less concerned about the arch than I am the appearance of the grid pattern over the brick.
Right.
And the windows, for that matter.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I think my initial gut reaction to the rail along Second was it was a little heavy. Just thinking that there already is conduit on that wall, and I guess it just kind of blended in for me. But seeing the dark black of that rail along the walls made it more prominent. Listening to the discussions today, I maybe could be swayed the other way on that. Just thinking about how that corner's always been kind of a hidden little section of the building, and maybe this would be a way to make it more prominent. But I think I'd have to think about that one longer. And having used the building before, I think a canopy in the back, in the rear of the building does make sense. But I definitely agree that I don't see the need for that black bar extending horizontally out from it. That's not acting as a canopy. It's just more decorative. That could be, harkening back to a sliding door that was never there. So I think those are my comments, and thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. I'm not seeing any other commissioners jumping up to speak. Rob, do you feel like you have enough information to continue working with the applicant on this?
I do, Chair Howard. Yes, thanks everyone for your comments on this.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, let's move on since we don't have to actually have an action on this. No vote to be taken at this point. We look forward to seeing the design when it comes back in, and we'll consider it then. Do commissioners or staff have any announcements or commission business to discuss? I usually look to Andrea first. Thank you, Andrea. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, Andrea Burke, supervisor for the Historic Preservation Team. I usually do have some announcements to make at each meeting. Thank you, Chair Howard. A couple announcements to make. I just wanted to say today at the Business Inspections, Housing and Zoning Committee, the committee heard an appeal for the demolition of 2424 West Lake of the Isles Parkway. That appeal was approved at Biz committee, so that will go to council for a full vote in a week or two. So in other words, the Biz committee overturned HPC's decision. So that is that. Our new commissioner will not be able to start until mid-April. There were some hiccups along the way, but hopefully that new commissioner will be starting, and I think everything is final, so I can say, but their name is Meredith Anderson. They are an archaeologist by trade, and hope to join us at our next HPC meeting, when we will have hopefully a full commission at that point in time. Also, along couple just housekeeping notes, elections, since our new commissioner was not able to join us tonight, my hope was to do verbal elections at the next meeting, and then I'm sorry, verbal nominations at the next meeting, and then elections on the following meeting. with respect to the new commissioner, I was going to push those back a cycle. So we'll let our new commissioner have a meeting, and then on the next round, we will do verbal nominations and then verbal elections after that. Chair Howard, I know, I see your face. Things did not go as planned, but we'll work through it. I also wanted to start talking about retreat dates and seeing what is available on commissioners' schedules. I can reach out. I mean, we can talk about it on the record, but hoping for a spring retreat date, possibly in May, if commissioners are up for it. And I can reach out for scheduling for that. The last item, I will turn to our clerk, but I will give a brief update, which is what I think everybody has been wanting to hear, but returning to in-person meetings, this is happening. And council approved its return to start April 11th, which is coming up very soon. And then the independent bodies will be returning shortly afterwards. For HPC, it is likely to be either on April 19th or May 4th. We are still figuring out how this is going to happen. I'm going to turn to our clerk, Ken, who can give some context to this development.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, I'm Ken Daylor, Manager of Legislative Support Services in the Clerk's Office. Everything Andrea said is correct. It's the council will begin its return to in-person meetings on April 11th, and as part of the resolution council adopted last week, they directed the clerk to develop a plan for returning to in-person for all the other various non-council bodies, including the Heritage Preservation Commission, which we refer to as an independent body. In all likelihood, that is to be probably a relatively quick turnaround. So it would likely mean that your next meeting will be in person. And if not that meeting, it's likely to be the meeting after that, which I think is May 4th. We have been, doing remote meetings for a long time, and we were hoping that when we returned, we would have a hybrid option to allow people to kind of participate remotely. We've actually been doing a fair amount of testing over the last couple of years, but we did just some final testing in the last week, and it became clear that we are not ready to provide that option at this time. State statutes make it relatively challenging to have remote meetings, and that would mostly affect staff and members of the public. The commissioners would need to return to in-person meetings regardless, even if staff and members of the public were able to participate in a remote format. But at this point, we are looking at a situation in which all of our bodies are either going to have to be 100% in person or 100% remote. We will have a decision in the next couple days, which I've been working, keeping Andrea in the loop about, because basically the clerk's office is working on a plan to bring all of the independent bodies back at the same time. And because notices are due for public hearings at your next meeting, as well as the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting, which is the same week as yours, we are approaching a deadline in which a decision will need to be made. So we're working with our partners in the attorney's office, communications, IT, to make sure that we're all ready to go. So we'll have information to you as soon as possible as to whether or not your next meeting will be in person or remote.
Thank you for that update. Andrea, do you have anything else?
No, that concludes my updates. Thank you.
I wanted to let you know I'm going to be missing the May 17th meeting. So as you're thinking about the voting and the nomination process, however that falls into your schedule, I'm giving you an advanced heads up on that.
Thank you. I'll consider it.
Okay. I just want to let folks know that the Coliseum Building and Hall at 2708 East Lake Street, which we reviewed at our January 18th meeting, was actually listed on the National Register of Historic Places just last week, March 24th. And I see Commissioner Bjornberg has an announcement.
Yeah, I'm just gonna plug the email that I had sent to people, I don't know, last week maybe, about the 2022 Minneapolis Preservation Awards, which is gonna be in person, if you can believe that. It'll be in May at the Capri Theater, which I think is a great spot. I have had one commissioner volunteer to be part of that jury, and I would love another commissioner. If anybody is interested, just send me an email. That's it.
And being a juror on that is a lot of fun. So you get to see a lot of great projects. And so I'd encourage any commissioners who are interested in doing that to contact Commissioner Bjornberg.
And it doesn't take too long either. I did it last year. It's like one night reviewing projects, talking about them. It's very similar to what we do here.
Right. Right. Wonderful. Any other announcements from anybody? With that, we have completed all items on the agenda for this meeting. I will ask members and staff if there are any other matters that must come before the meeting. Seeing none, there being no other business. If not, and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. The next regular meeting of the Heritage Preservation Commission is April 19th, 2022. Thank you, everyone.